I didn't lose her in a fight. That's what makes this harder to explain. There was no moment where voices were raised, an O line that couldn't be taken back, an O final argument you could point to and say, that's where it ended. What we had didn't break. It faded, and I helped it fade by staying quiet when it mattered. Her name was Laura. She used to say what she felt without hesitation, not dramatically, just honestly. She believed clarity was kindness. I believed silence was stability. Somewhere between those two ideas, we stopped meeting each other. When we first moved in together, everything felt intentional. We chose the apartment carefully, argued about furniture, made plans that extended years into the future. We talked about kids, not seriously, but sincerely. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the version of life you're supposed to land in. And once I felt like I'd landed, I stopped adjusting my course. I work long hours, not because I love it, because it's expected, because being reliable feels safer than being emotionally available. Laura understood that, at least at first. She never complained when I stayed late, never questioned my ambition. She just asked, occasionally, "Are you still here with me?" I always said yes. I just didn't always act like it. Over time, she started filling the quiet herself. She made new friends, picked up hobbies I didn't join, stopped waiting for me to come home before starting her evenings. I told myself this was healthy. Independence, balance. What I didn't realize was that she was learning how not to need me. There were moments she tried to pull me back in. Small ones. "Can we talk? Do you have a minute? I feel like something's off." I'd listen. Nod. Offer reassurance without engagement. "You're overthinking," I'd say. "Everything's fine." I said it often enough that she stopped asking. That's the dangerous part. When someone stops asking for reassurance, it doesn't mean they don't need it. It means they've accepted they won't get it. I noticed the shift in subtle ways. She stopped telling me about her day in detail, stopped sharing ideas she was excited about, stopped looking at me for confirmation before making decisions. She became complete on her own, and instead of feeling proud, I felt oddly unnecessary. One night, she said something that should have shaken me. We were sitting on opposite ends of the couch. "I don't think you'd notice if I left for a while," she said. I laughed, not because it was funny, because it felt uncomfortable. "Of course I would," I replied. She didn't argue. She just nodded and changed the subject. That was my warning. I ignored it. Weeks later, I came home to find her packing a small suitcase. Not dramatically, just folding clothes carefully. "I'm visiting my sister," she said. "For how long?" I asked. She paused. "Not sure," she replied. That pause stayed with me. While she was gone, the apartment felt quieter than it should have. Not empty. Unclaimed. I realized how much of our life had been built around her emotional effort. The remembering, the checking in, the maintaining. Without her doing that work, nothing moved. She came back after 10 days. Different. Calmer. More certain. She hugged me when she arrived, but it felt like closure pretending to be affection. That night, she sat across from me at the table. "I don't want to fight," she said. "I just want to be honest." I nodded. I was already bracing. "I feel like I've been living a life you're comfortable with," she continued, and slowly shrinking mine to fit inside it. I wanted to interrupt. Explain. Defend. I didn't. For once, I stayed quiet. "I don't think you mean to do this," she said. "But you don't argue for me. For us." That sentence landed hard. Because she was right. I avoided conflict so well that I avoided commitment too. She wasn't asking me to change careers, or make dramatic promises. She was asking me to choose her out loud. And I realized how rarely I had. "I need to know," she said, "that if I stopped accommodating you, you'd step forward." I didn't answer immediately. Not because I didn't care. Because I didn't know how to promise something I'd never practiced. That silence stretched. And in it, I felt something irreversible taking shape. Not anger. Not heartbreak. Decision. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment where love stopped being about feeling and started being about courage. And I wasn't sure I had enough. The silence after her question felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. "I need to know," she had said, "that if I stopped accommodating you, you'd step forward." I stared at the table, tracing the grain of the wood with my eyes, buying myself seconds I didn't deserve. Because the truth wasn't complicated. It was uncomfortable. I had never learned how to step forward emotionally, that I had only learned how not to make things worse. And those are not the same thing. I care about you, I finally said. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew they weren't enough. Her expression didn't change. Angered, disappointment. Just a quiet recognition. I know, she replied. That's not what I'm asking. She leaned back in her chair and folded her arms, not defensively, but protectively, like someone who had learned to guard her expectations. I'm asking if you're willing to be uncomfortable for me, she said, because I've been uncomfortable for us for a long time. That sentence exposed something I'd been avoiding. Love isn't measured by how calm you keep things, it's measured by what you're willing to disrupt. I wanted to promise her everything. I wanted to say I'd change, that I'd be more present, more vocal, more decisive. But promises without practice felt dishonest. And she deserved honesty more than reassurance. I don't know how, I admitted. Her eyes softened, but her posture didn't. That scares me, she said quietly. For the next few days, we existed in a fragile ceasefire. We were kind to each other, careful, but kindness without closeness feels like distance with manners. I started noticing all the moments I had previously ignored. How she hesitated before sharing thoughts. How she phrased emotions as observations, not needs. How she no longer waited for my reaction. She had already begun the process of emotional separation. I tried to change in ways that felt safe. I came home earlier, asked about her day, listened longer. But listening without initiative still feels passive. She noticed. She always noticed. One evening, she said, "It feels like you're trying not to lose me instead of trying to choose me." That hit harder than anger ever could. I spent nights lying awake, realizing how often I'd mistaken stability for love. I thought being consistent was enough, that I thought providing security was the same as offering intimacy. But intimacy requires exposure, and exposure requires risk. I had lived my life avoiding risk in relationships, convincing myself that calm was connection. The turning point didn't come in a dramatic conversation. It came on a Sunday afternoon. She was reading by the window, sunlight falling across her face. I watched her for a long time before speaking. "I think I've been waiting for you to adapt to me," I said, "instead of meeting you halfway." She looked up, really looked, and she asked, "And I don't want to do that anymore." That was the first time I felt myself step forward. Not confidently, but deliberately. "I don't want to be the man who lets love erode because he's afraid of discomfort," I continued. "I don't know how to be better yet, but I want to learn, actively, not eventually." The room stayed quiet, not tense, attentive. She closed her book. "I've heard versions of that before," she said. "What makes this different?" I swallowed. "Because I'm not asking you to wait while I figure it out," I replied. "I'm asking you to watch me try." We started small, uncomfortably small. I initiated conversations instead of responding to them, named emotions before they turned into distance, spoke even when I wasn't sure I'd say it right. Sometimes I failed. Sometimes I retreated, and she called it out, gently but firmly. Not every moment improved. Some nights ended in frustration. Some mornings felt uncertain. But something had shifted. I was no longer managing the relationship. I was participating in it. One evening, she said something that stayed with me. "I don't need you to be perfect," she said. "I need you to be present before I disappear." That sentence felt like both a gift and a warning. Weeks passed. The distance between us shrank, but it didn't vanish. Trust doesn't reset, it rebuilds. And sometimes it rebuilds unevenly. One night, as we lay in bed, she turned to me. "I'm still deciding," she said. "About us?" "Yes." I nodded. "I understand." And for the first time, I truly did. Because love isn't proven by intention. It's proven by consistency under pressure. And this time, the pressure was real. I didn't know how our decision would end, but I knew something had already changed. I had finally learned that silence isn't safety. It's absence. And absence, over time, teaches people how to leave. The hardest part wasn't waiting for her answer. It was living in a space where love existed, but certainty didn't. Days passed without conclusions. Not distant, not cold, just careful. Every conversation felt meaningful because it might be one of the last in this version of us. And that awareness changed how I showed up. I stopped trying to prove myself. Instead, I focused on being visible. When something bothered me, I said it. When I felt fear, I named it. When I didn't understand her emotions, I asked, without defensiveness. Not because I wanted to win her back, but because I finally understood that love without honesty is just comfort with a future expiration date. One evening, she said, "You feel different." I didn't rush to explain. "I feel different," I replied. She studied my face the way you study something fragile. Not to judge it, but to see if it would hold. "What changed?" she asked. "I stopped assuming you'd stay," I said. That truth surprised both of us. I had lived as if love was something that naturally continued as long as no one broke it. But love isn't passive. It's active maintenance. Neglect doesn't look like cruelty. It looks like postponement. A week later, she asked if we could talk. The kind of sentence that rearranges your breathing. We sat on the couch, closer than before, but not touching. "I've been paying attention," she said. "Not to what you say, to what you do." I nodded. "And?" I asked quietly. She took a breath. "I see effort," she said. "I see awareness. I see courage." My chest tightened. "But I also see how long it took you to arrive here," she continued. That part landed softly, but deeply. "I don't blame you," she added. "But I need to be honest with myself." I didn't interrupt. This wasn't a moment to defend. It was a moment to listen. She folded her hands together. "I love who you're becoming," she said, "but I'm still deciding if I have the strength to stay while you become him." Silence stretched between us. Not painful, just real. "I won't ask you to stay," I said finally, "but I won't disappear either." She looked at me, eyes searching. "That's new," she said. "It shouldn't be," I replied, "but it is." That night, I didn't sleep much. Not from anxiety, from clarity. For the first time, I understood that love doesn't guarantee togetherness. Sometimes it simply reveals truth. 2 days later, she came home earlier than usual. She stood in the doorway for a moment before speaking. "I made a decision," she said. I sat down, prepared, not for one outcome, but for honesty. "I'm staying," she said, "but not the way we were before." Relief washed through me, but it wasn't careless relief. It was responsible relief. "We don't go back," she continued. "We go forward. Slowly, consciously." I nodded. "I'm ready," I said. "I know," she replied. "That's why I'm staying." Our relationship didn't become perfect. We still argued, still misunderstood each other, still stumbled. But something fundamental had shifted. I no longer waited to be invited into emotional space. I entered it, respectfully, consistently, willingly. Months later, she said something I'll never forget. "I don't feel like I'm carrying us alone anymore." That sentence mattered more than, "I love you," because it meant trust had returned. Looking back, I realized this. Love doesn't end because people stop caring. It ends because people stop choosing. Choosing discomfort, choosing conversation, choosing growth. I didn't learn how to love overnight, but I learned how not to abandon it silently. And sometimes, that's enough.